right, welcome. It is Tuesday, December 14th, 2021. We're convened as the Provo City School District Board of Education. We're meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. The time is 5:37 p.m. We will begin with a roll call. Melanie Hall, Board President.
Rebecca Nelson, Board Vice President. Jennifer Partridge, Board Member. Terry McKay, Board Member.
McKay Jensen, Board Member.
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
Gina
Hales, Board Member.
Derek Anderson, Business Administrator.
Keith Rochelle, Superintendent.
All right. Is there a motion to convene?
I move that we convene study session.
All right, we are now in study session. We are going to have a construction update by Derek Anderson.
Bonnie's going to pull up the spreadsheet.
Oh, yeah. Give me just a second, sorry.
You're okay. That's just... Perfect. So the Tempview project right now is going along pretty smoothly. Right now they're pouring footings for part of that addition. This week they ran into a little bit of hiccups just because of the weather. They had to bring in heating crews to just keep the concrete from, because what happens is if it gets drops below a certain temperature and also with moisture, you've got to actually heat the concrete so it cures properly, and so that's kind of, it adds an extra layer of complexion, but it's nothing that they can't handle, they're not equipped for. So that's kind of what's going on right now with Tempview in terms of the construction piece. There has been a little bit of a hiccup on the steel prices. There's right now with steel, Mark is kind of giving me an estimate of about a $400,000 change order that's coming, just due to strictly steel prices going up. They are working with engineers, with the CM, the construction manager, to try and see how much they can mitigate of that. He goes, we're hopeful that we can potentially mitigate some of it, but there's some of it we definitely won't be able to. But he's like, we're working on it. But so that's definitely coming. But it's it's kind of been the tune of the project since this has been going on. So, but that process is coming along. We go to the next slide, Bonnie. Let's see here. This is the outer wall that is, I believe, if I'm remembering right, this is the addition where the over by the gym, the Thunderdome, bingo, thank you. And that's a part that they're shoring up right now, and everything seems to be coming along. There hasn't been any hiccups, but that's kind of where they're at right now on that, is they're working on shoring up those walls at the Thunderdome. Will you go to the next slide, Bonnie? Yeah, so this is the other level of it. So that's kind of what he was explaining what was happening with the project there. In terms of timeline for the construction, they haven't given us any delays yet as of the last construction update I went to. So things still seem to be moving along okay. But they are a tad worried, but they aren't. There's nothing yet that they said where we can't readjust schedules and things like that to continue on with the current schedule that they're on.
Is this shoring up, was this originally planned, or did they
so these are part, I think
determine they need to?
From what my understanding is, these are part of the pylons that are being driven in to shore up the walls, if I'm remembering this correctly from his explanation.
Is this the wing that is going to be removed later?
That ring's already down, isn't it?
Because on the right side is the football field.
So here's, this is the
Here's
football
the-
field
yeah.
right here, this
No.
outside, isn't that?
No, that's
the
track.
Thunderdome.
That's the Thunderdome.
That's the
So this is
Thunderdome.
the entrance from the football field.
Oh, okay.
And so
It's
why
not
are
an
they shoring
exterior
up those
wall.
walls?
Because that portion is
It might
down.
flip.
And they need to make sure
Yeah.
the Thunderdome wall doesn't come down.
Yeah.
Okay, so the stuff on the left is gone? No. Yeah.
Is that right?
It should be
Or it's going
Within the
down.
process of coming down.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all being
Okay.
replaced.
Thank
So
you.
that's kind of, I mean, I got this yesterday and finding out, so I tried to get as much detail on this part as I could from him. So I apologize, I don't have all the details on this part. We kind of got some more details on some of the later stuff. But my understanding is that they're kind of shoring up some of these walls, and that's kind of what's working on right now, and along with the other part, which is the footings on the previous slide. So there's a lot of concrete work going on.
And that's to shore it up so that we can continue to use the Thunderdome during construction.
Correct. So this is kind of what's going on with the Dixon, if you go to the next slide. So right now they're kind of in the process of programming Dixon and Wasatch. So as of on the first week of January, we're planning on, we had talked previously about the construction committee. So the first week of January, we're going to pull together that construction committee to kind of go over what programming, what engineering and things like that has been given. It'll be a separate meeting, outside of the meeting that occurs with them. But that's kind of what's kind of currently going on. It sounds like Todd and John have already had a meeting with them, and they're kind of going over the engineering with thank you, Bonnie, with the city and also the engineering firms up in Salt Lake to figure out how to best position these buildings on the land. But so as part of this construction committee, we talked about having 2 people come on to kind of be able to ask questions as the process is going along, so that way it's, when we get to the point where it's all right, we're issuing bonds, the board's approving it, that they're happy with the process and the actual outcome of these buildings. So if there's 2 board members that would like to be a part of this,
I should probably, since it's going to
one
be
of
in
the
my
six.
area.
Okay, so we can.
Well, you're saying it's a construction committee that's bigger than just a certain project?
So it's Dixon and Wasatch, so it's going to be for the 2 buildings.
Okay.
Because they're both going to be going simultaneously. And so what Mark's going to be doing is he's going to be bringing us the updates from the design and engineering teams and things like that. So that way we can be able to ask questions, things like that along the way. And if there's anything that we need to adjust, it's at least adjusting all along the way. And it's not, we got to this point, now go back and try to readjust everything, or sorry, it's too late, and then now people are unhappy with the size or the design or colors or mascot or whatever, right? And so it's kind of keeping the communication going and the process going during all of the planning phases. So
This is a little bit off topic, but do we know when we're going to issue the bonds?
So we have until it is September. We have 1 year from the date they were approved to issue them. So based off of my understanding with this one is bingo. This one right here, the bid date is May 1st. So we should be able to easily meet that with a bid date of May 1st. And so,
But there's no, are we trying to capture a certain point in the market?
so that's the
Ahead of
question.
that?
We can issue right now if we want to.
Yeah.
And we do it the full amount, because I completely understand what you're saying is that if they start ratcheting up interest rates because of the CPI and what's going on, and they're trying to curb inflation, that is absolutely a risk. So we can issue the bonds with sight unseen based off of what the cost is. If the cost comes in more, we would we'll either have to figure it out through capital levy and pay for it, or we will have to figure out a way to bond extra for it to cover that. Let's just, or we may end up, if it, say this building comes in at, 70 million and we bonded 80 million.
I mean, we have maximum amounts in our bond resolution.
Correct.
So we could
Issue the max and
issue the max.
So there does come in some issues though, so the way, once you issue bonds, you have 3 years from the date of issuance.
To finish the project, but we're not
Bingo.
building a high school. So
Bingo.
that's the only reason we've ever waited before is we wanted to go, we're building a high school, we got to be able to finish
Bingo.
that. But we're not building a high school.
Correct.
We
So-
ought to be
Yeah,
a little more aggressive here.
So we absolutely can do that. The other thing too is there's called arbitrage rules.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's something we can work around, but the way arbitrage rules work is if you earn interest on this money as it's parked, if it's greater, that you earn greater than what the stated rate is in the bond documents, there's some hefty penalties, and also one of them is jail time, and I don't want to go to jail. I've never seen it happen, but it is actually in statute, in the federal code, so. But
we
we can mitigate that. There
We
is some
can
mitigation.
mitigate that depending, I mean, we don't have to put it in the state investment fund, we can just hold it in.
Bingo,
in
correct.
the other part.
We could just leave it in our own Zion's account that earns no interest and.
Or little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you would want to protect against the rising inflation for sure.
I think that's going to hurt us way more than underbidding. So
Yep.
might be sooner than later.
So if we want to go ahead and issue those, I can get with Zion's and we can start that ball rolling if the board is interested in issuing those without getting bond costs, and we can just issue them for the max amount. And then once the project's done, if it comes in less, we can essentially just take that money and either use it for other projects that we've seen or that we have a need for, or early prepay the bonds and be done.
I think that the prepaying the bonds is fine, but you're going to do the max and early because, I mean, it's likely various things.
Is there any other thing?
Heating concrete.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we absolutely can. If the board is interested in doing that, I will contact Zions and say, all right, we're ready to pull the trigger. Let's do it.
What does Zion say? Have we approached Zion to say what their opinion is?
So I have talked with them, and they're just saying, when are you interested in doing it? I can just say what your professional opinion is. My guess is they're going to say issue it because of exactly their threat of rising interest costs.
Once we issue, when does that affect the homeowner or the taxpayers?
So it will, once we issue, there will be no impact on the taxpayers until the board changes the tax rate. And so what we can do is we can structure the bond payment schedule. So typically what happens with bond payment schedules is there's 2 payments a year. There's one that usually like in November and one in like June. You kind of, or one in August and one in January. It's just kind of a 2 payment system where one payment is like purely interest, and the other payment is principal and interest, the remaining principal interest for the year. And so what you can do is, so like the first year, until we've actually got our rate set and we know how much we're gonna, what we would need, is the first year you do just an interest payment. And so then the pushes off that big principal payment, until, we can strategize that on when we want to do that. But it wouldn't be due this year, it would be due, the first payment would be due at a minimum 2023 fiscal year.
And if we did it in June or July, it's going to be the same way no matter what.
Correct.
And you get that 18 months of growth, so the rates come down, and then you're just moving them back, and it softens all that in a much better way.
So if the board wants to do that, I'm absolutely happy to get that ball rolling.
I think it's something we'll start looking into.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll contact Zions tomorrow, and I'll have them initiate that process. So at least, because it's going to take 60 days to 90 days to fully lock and fund, and so I'll get that ball rolling.
Back to your earlier question or whatever, I'd also be happy to be on that committee, but I feel like that might make me on too many committees compared to other people, so if other people want it, I'm
Why don't we
Okay.
do this, if you're interested in being on that committee, will you email me? And then, because I think we want to limit it to.
Did you hear that, Gina?
And then we
Yes.
can go from
Okay.
there. So,
Perfect. And then, so for Wasatch, it's kind of the same thing. The thing is, with only difference between Wasatch and Dixon is the bidding completion time is still to be determined, as they're still trying to figure out the biggest issue, which is site prep and what is gonna, how they can configure the school and make it work, because there's a lot of engineering work that's going to, and surveying work that's being done right now to see where they can put that building.
a question about Tenview. Are they going to be working on Tenview during the Christmas break?
I'm assuming they are, but I mean, because they usually don't take the break, and so my guess is they are. I'm sure they'll take a few days down around Christmas, and maybe one day down around New Year's, but that's about it.
Okay.
And then the other one, okay, so here's another one. We've formed an internal committee for capital improvements. So currently right now, everybody in the district, all the principals and the departments are putting their capital requests into Mark. And then what we're going to do is, it's like Todd, myself, Alex, Siraj, Chad, just a handful of the department heads, we're going to get together and kind of look through all these requests and kind of do like a prioritization of, how critical is this? How non-critical is this? What's a, wish list item? What's one of those things that we need to fund? And from there, we're going to build out kind of our capital outlay projections. So that way we get a clear picture of what our capital needs are going to be into the future, what our budgets are, and things like that. So this is going to be completely new, but this will be internal completely, of really just as the outside of the building process. It's just going to be what we bring to the board to say, hey, look, as internal needs we have, this is the budget we're asking for. So I don't know.
It's the helicopter.
I know. I know exactly what it is, but I wonder if this building is going to withstand it.
So that's it for the capital update. Is there any other questions you have? All right.
Any other questions?
I kind of have a question about Wasatch. So if we go in this contract for the property, can they share their suppliers? Because the Orem Temple has gone up super fast to get their suppliers so we can build the school really fast.
I mean, we can always see what cross work and cross suppliers can be done. The one thing that we battle that they don't battle is being under a state institution. Our building process and codes and things like that may be different than what a private building is having to do. So I'm sure there's a lot of overlap, but Mark would be a better idea to know better what would be different. So, but we can always.
Because I drive by that Orem Temple twice a week and I'm like,
Gotta go up quick.
that's fast.
It also
suppliers.
depends on what kind of building material. Like if they went and did the whole thing, a lot of it 2x4 with veneer, brick exterior, we don't do that. A lot of our buildings are block, and so it takes more time to put the block down and things like that. So it just kind of comes down to differences in construction style too.
Okay. Next, we're going to have a land trust training by Alex Jensen.
Don't say it like that.
It's exciting. It is exciting.
Why are you gonna be like that?
Again, required by statute.
friends.
And now you go pull that stuff. Jeez. Way to go, man. Love it. Well, Bonnie's gonna drive for me as best she can, and I will do my best to navigate.
I'm just
Hopefully
admiring
you're-
your tie.
What's that?
Can you show? My eyes are not.
The present right there.
There, look at that. I can see that.
So hopefully you were able to look at the information online. There's a lot more information that I'm going to present on today. Rebecca, thank you for kind of giving me some direction on some of the things that we were hoping to be able to share today and give you guys some background on school land trust. So if you'll go to that first slide, the land trust is really designed for kids, and it has empowered the community to be involved in the decision-making process with the schools to use this money from the land trust to support kids in their local schools. And it gives the community council, which is comprised of members from the school as well as from members from the parents and the community, to be a part of that decision-making process. Okay, so go to the next slide for me. So hopefully you've read this. The land trust is based on land that the state owns that has been designated as land trust, and they have, as the state has in 1999 has legislated that the money that comes in from these land trusts would be designated to help and support our education system. And so it's a little bit different than other states, because Utah legislature, in my opinion, did a really phenomenal job in kind of setting this up in a way that would push the money back towards students and being able to use it that way. So just a basic overview. Now, if you want more in-depth information and or information regarding the land trust, I can get you to the website, but basically it's the schoollandtrust.org, and you go there and there's so much information you could read and read and read and read and read.
Piggyback on that, a lot of times at USDA they'll have a breakout session on some of the things that's more in-depth.
Including this year. And there's lots of legislative plans to use land trust money to solve other budget problems. So there is now an organization of former school board members that is in defense of the school. Yeah.
And can I just echo, McKay, I really do have concerns when they're trying to pull money from there to fix all the roads in the state, when it should be designated for our education system, and that was the intent behind the land trust. And they've done such a good job that it's showing remarkably how well this money can be perpetually growing, right?
It's
So
grown,
McKay,
it's
Yeah.
grown every year. I mean, it's gotten to the point where originally when this happened, it was like you could get some supplies with it. And it's gotten to the point where it's enough money where schools can fund like a full teacher. And so it's a really cool thing in the way they've designed it.
Yeah. McKay, keep us posted on that. I think that's something that we just want to make sure that our community councils also are aware of, and we can push that information out. So Bonnie used to do this for me because she works really closely with the state to make sure that information gets out. If we need to push information out to the community councils and principals to make sure that we're giving our voice, we can do that through my current assistant, who is Tina Rankin. Okay, next slide. So you will see here, this is the allocation into what Derek was just talking about. This is 2016-17 all the way up to currently our current allocations by school. So you can see every year it's all based on enrollment, and there's a formula that they use to allocate that funding all the way across. So just recognize that, I mean, you can see Provo High School, they've started back here in 2016-17 at 146,000. They're now up to 270,000. And when I first started working on a community council in Mapleton Elementary School, when I was there as a teacher, I think we had a total of about $4,000 to be able to use. Now look at these schools, and my school at Mapleton was significantly larger than our smallest school, which would be Franklin Elementary School. They're still, I mean, they're getting 46,000, even though their enrollment may have gone down a little bit. They're still getting a significant amount of money to be able to use through that community council to support the school.
So if there's a drop from like last year to this coming year, or the estimate, just going to be because of enrollment, right? Okay.
So far, I haven't seen this, and Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen this where an enrollment number is either holding steady or increasing, that the number has gone down.
Okay.
So.
And this is based on the October 1st count?
Yes, it's based on that. Yeah. Okay. There's one school, E-School, that we navigate. Just recognize That is one of the tension points within our school district. There is money there, but the way the community councils were designed and set up, they're really designed for brick and mortar type schools, not for online schools. And so that has been a constant little bit of a bugaboo in this process, to be able to have the community councils in those online schools be able to spend the money that they have, and spend enough of it to be able to get the needs, to meet the needs of the expectations of the community councils. It really is, it's complicated, and we've met with the state multiple times, and many times they've looked at us and like, I don't know what to tell you to do. It's like, okay, well, here we go.
So
And
why
we
do they
just
have
navigate.
zeros in there a couple times?
So a couple of times where we had, this was before we reduced our numbers at RE school, we couldn't spend all the money. And so because of that, we asked them to redistribute it to the other schools, and we just, does that make sense? Because we couldn't spend it all. And so this is where, again, the intent of this money is to use it on this year's kids. So if it's not being used, the state wants to make sure that it's getting used on this year's kids. Okay? Good question. Okay. Next slide. So this is where the intent of the community council and the school is to use this money. It's supposed to be flexible. It's supposed to have a lot of ability within the school to be able to be used in a variety of ways. But it is really targeting the greatest academic need of within a school. Now, the one piece to this is recognize that there's money that is being used by ESSA or through our school district, that sometimes the greatest academic need is being met through other funds. And so the school community council recognizes that, or the state recognizes that, so they're saying, based on what you've been able to articulate through your school improvement plan or whatever plan you have, you look at your greatest academic need, and if your need for language arts is being met, what's your next greatest academic need, and target that with this money. So just recognize that's where that flexibility allows them to be able to do a few more things that other money is restricted and that they can't use it for. So it can address some of the behavior concerns and needs. That money has increased a little every year. It's now up to about $7,000 that they can use. And then the other piece to this is that they need to address safe walking routes in the elementary schools and work to educate on digital citizenship. Okay? So the accountability piece is that they really want it tied back to some type of academics. The other piece is that you guys are kind of the gatekeepers. This is where this money is different than other funds. It doesn't go directly to the district to be able to disperse it in a lot of different ways. It's saying per pupil amount. The state says, here's the money to Derek. Derek looks and says, we have to take this much out for management of the funds, and beyond that it goes straight to the schools. And then you guys are the ones to say it's good or not good. Does that make sense? And then the community councils are also accountable for that. Go to the next one for me. Okay? So this is just basically what we talked about. This is basically how it's all kind of divided up, but it's not equally portioned this way. It's just saying these are the main priorities of our school community councils. Okay, go to the next one. So as a school board, you have a rubric, and Rebecca and I have been working on just refining this a little bit more and being more linked directly to that checklist, if you will, that the school board is supposed to follow. And these are the basic things that we're looking for from you as a school board when you look at your community councils. Make sure that there's a specific goal, and it targets an academia area, as well as it's measurable, that it's time bound, and there's results that can be tied to it. Make sure that the academic need is somewhere in there explained, that this is why we're choosing this one, because all these others have been met, or this is where we feel like this money could be greatly used in the school at this point. Then just ways to measure it, and then there's an expenditure piece, and then there's also how are they planning to spend that money that goes with those goals. Okay? Now, the one piece here that I just want to make sure that everybody understands, the state is really tightening up on making sure that schools spend the money on this year's kids. So about 3 years ago, we got called out and saying that we had way too much carryover, and part of it was because of the e-school. So we went up and met with the state and helped them understand the e-school situation, but they also came back and stated, this money is designed to be spent. It is not meant to be a bank that we use for huge projects later on. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be. There just needs to be a clear explanation as to why. So if a board or if a community council like a Franklin, they may not have enough money this year to do some of the things that they want to do because they don't get as much because they're a smaller school. They may be saving some of their money, more than 10%, for the next year because they're of a bigger project. Totally legit, and then they would just make sure that they articulate that in the plan so that it can be carried over, and you guys would just have to approve that. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions here? Yeah.
So I have felt in the past sometimes that it wasn't clear when I would get it from a principal about why they picked that academic goal. Are you going to let them know we'd like to have more detail on that, or if they change like their forms so that we can make sure we get that information from them?
We can communicate that with them and just make sure that they're explaining that. Part of the struggle is that they're writing a plan, and we're assuming based on the school getting the directions from the principal and the community council that they're not going to go into a bunch of explanation to the school board in that plan about why they picked that goal. But I can work with the schools to say, help us understand a little bit more, that we can make it on the side why you picked this as your greatest academic need, if that's what you would like me to do. Because in the plan that they're going to submit, that doesn't need to be explained in there as much as you need to understand that that's why they're picking that greatest academic need.
I think from the high level school board training, they're assuming that, I mean, the greatest academic need is basically voted on by those parents.
Yeah, and I assume that
So-
too,
so
but then
they-
when I'm
and-
asked
and
to,
so-
is
so
that
is-
correct? I don't know.
It's an assumption, right?
Is that what they want the school boards, when they say the school board should approve it, is they go, is this measurable? Or was that decision determined on measurable data? Is that something that you can measure? And even if it's a behavior, asking the principal, are you taking data on this? Basically, that's
that's
the
more
one
where we
check.
should
Yeah.
focus.
So
Okay.
it's one of the.
Can we measure this goal? Can we measure?
And this is the tension that I think you're articulating well, McKay, is that there are some assumptions that are being made. We put a lot of trust in the community council and the principal to make those decisions, and they're making a vote and making a decision as a community council to say, this is why we're choosing this. And so there is some assumption there. But again, if you feel like that's something you want us to pursue, I'm more than willing to work with principals to say, just explain why you've selected this as your greatest academic need, kind of as a side, and we can do that.
I'm okay. In fact, I'm looking at this year's rubric. It looks like you took that specific wording out, and it is more about, is it aligned with academic goals, and are they SMART goals?
So one of your
Then-
board members was really good at giving me some feedback to work
She
through
did
something. So anyway, okay, go to the next slide for me. Okay, we've talked a lot about this, data-driven, and this is one of the pieces that I would just say when we train our community councils. It is guided by the principal, but the decision is made by the community council. Does that make sense? And recognize that there's always two more community council parents more than elected school officials. Does that make sense? So that the power rests with the parents in the community. Okay, go to the next slide. Goal-driven, we've kind of talked through this. One of the pieces that you'll just want to look for is that what do we expect students to achieve with the purchase of these plans? What students' academic improvement does the council expect? So those are the kind of questions I would say you would want to push back to them. If you see that it's not articulated in a plan, those are the kind of questions I would say push back to them and say, what do you expect to see? What do you see as a result of doing this with this plan? Okay, go ahead, next slide. These are the 5 areas that each goal is tied to. So to make sure that when we have a goal, you won't see all of this. Some of this is done behind the scenes. You're going to see a lot of the goals. So for example, it's going to be, here's our goal, here's the academic area, here's how we'll measure it, the plans, but sometimes you won't get all the expenditures and things into your plan. So if you need all of that, please work with Tina and we'll get you whatever information you feel like you want to clarify or go through. Does that make sense? Okay, go to the next slide. Carryover we already talked about. And then, and if there, one piece with the carryover is just making sure that it's approved. So if they're going to carry over, we just want to know what it is. And typically, so Rebecca is my point person for community councils. So whenever there's a situation that I feel like we need to address, I'll first go to Rebecca and we'll talk it through. And if she feels like it's something that the whole council or the board needs to know about, we'll come and address that with you guys and make sure that happens. So for example, let's say that, and this happens frequently, we'll get going through the year and a community council will recognize that their goal is not being met or the expenditures are not happening the way they intended. They intended to purchase a certain program that would support moving forward, and that program is no longer either one, supported the way they thought, or two, it costs more than they thought it would. So we would come back and do an addendum or adjustment to the plan. And so initially I'll take that to Rebecca and we'll look at it and review it. If the goal isn't going to change and it's not going to make a big impact on a lot of the outcomes and other things that are going to happen, it's just changing a little bit of how we spend it. A lot of times we'll work to say we approved it, and then she'll let you guys know. And then if it's a major change, then that's where we'll bring it back to you guys to review and give us feedback and see if there's something that needs to be changed or they need to address within their plan. Okay? Go ahead and go to the next slide. These due dates are the big ones. In October is when they are, so there's two plans going on at the same time. So they've got current plan that they're working on and the plan that they just finished up. So actually 3, and then coming up, they're going to start working on the next plan. And all those plans, dates overlap, and it's a mess. So Tina and my assistants do a great job of trying to communicate out when those dates and things are happening so that we keep principals on top of getting those dates done. So we will have them by, so they're going to be finishing up their current plans, but the current site is down, so they're going to be submitting those to Tina. And then Tina is going to share those with you in a Google Doc for you guys to be able to look at and review and see how the plan worked for this last year. Then in January, that's when they'll submit those reports to us. I'll share that with you. But then in March, by the end of March, they will have submitted their next year's plan to me so that I can start to review those and get those to you guys so that in the April board meeting, we'll disperse those. You'll review your schools that you're assigned, go through the rubric, ask questions, make sure we clarify. I get those back to the schools so that they can make any changes that need to be done, and then by the May 15th board meeting-ish, we get those approved. And then in June, from May to June is when we send it up to the state. The state gives feedback back to the schools one more time, and then they make any final adjustments, and in the June board meeting is when we get the final approval on all of it. So many days to remember. Does that make sense?
Well, I have a question about the October 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Council selected, is that like a state law that the community council has to be finalized by October 1st?
I don't know that it's a state law. I can't answer from the state law perspective, but I know that that all of the new board or council members should all be entered into the system by that October 1st site,
But
with all their
can people be
communication
added
information.
on after October 1st?
They can if there needs to be an issue, because sometimes board members drop out mid-year, and so we have to, our council members drop out mid-year, so we have to add people in. So, yeah. Any other questions with that? All right, go to the next slide. Okay, another piece that's tied to this is safe walking routes. Elementary schools, this is a big deal. We really started communicating well with our city on this one, and we are working in the process of current requests that require the city to make physical changes to the streets and or crosswalks and crossing guards. So the other piece of this is that they work with the community council to go out and find out what are the safest routes. For example, this last week we met with the city and the Wasatch Community Council and the principal there to be able to start looking at the new site that's going to be for Wasatch, and started teasing out concerns and issues that they have, because when school starts, we aren't going to know where all the congestion is going to happen, but if we know where there are some areas that we may want crosswalks or crossing guards, we need to tease that out beforehand so that the city can plan by January to start thinking through, we need to have some paint and other things done, or we need to rearrange the way the city traffic flows so that we can make sure the kids are safe. So that's all part of this with our elementary schools. Secondary schools, they do have some of that, but it's not as intensive. They don't have to worry about it near as much. But they still need to make sure kids are safe. So go to the next one. And this is a prime example of this. So this is Amelia's plan this last year that they were requested with the city. And they wanted to say, you know what, this lane, this is turning into where Amelia is over here, and this goes straight out to the boat harbor. They wanted to, what was happening is the lane was going here and cars were darting around them and kids were still walking in these areas. And then coming this way, cars were darting and just going around people, and it was really making it unsafe for kids. So they made a request to say, let's add a left turn lane here, put in a refuge island, as well as extend that sidewalk, or that the road out further for a turn lane to be able to make it easier for kids to be safe. And the city honored that request, and they have started to make those changes. There's still some things they're working on, but they're working on that as well. And this was the first year that I've seen that work so well, for the first time in my experience here in Provo, which was great. So, okay, go to the next slide. Board responsibilities, I'm not going to go through all that. You guys have seen that, it's on that page. These are just the basic things that you need to be aware of. It's all the nuts and bolts of it, but I've just given you a synthesis of the whole thing with this slide. Go to the next one for me. And the one piece I just want to make sure that I communicate with you guys, and this kind of is what McKay was saying, you guys are the gatekeepers, but you're not necessarily meant to be detailing, picking on every little thing they got. The community council is designed to work closely with the principal to make sure that they're meeting the greatest academic needs within that school. The principal guides it, the community council makes the ultimate decision on what happens there. We're checks and balances to make sure that they're doing that piece. Go to the next slide for me. So this is where that rubric comes in. So when you guys get this rubric, you'll go through it and look at these, the basic expectations of what we've got, and just indicate, is it below what you expect, what you would expect, or is it above what you expect? Give them that feedback. And then over here are the comments that you can add and just say, hey, I need a little bit more clarity on this. And then we'll get that back to the principals. The principal will make the changes or things that they need to do, and just make sure the community council is aware of those changes that have been made. Any questions with this? Okay, go to the next slide. And here are the assignments that we have for our schools. So these are the assignments that currently are in place. If this is not correct, please let me know. Or if we need to make some changes, work with board president here at Hall, and let's make sure that we get those assignments made well and the way they need to be.
Okay, thank you. Any other further questions for Alex?
Okay, last slide. Questions? Yeah.
Where did you get the tie?
Where did they? So I have a dear friend that actually gave it to me, so I didn't buy it, but yes, Grinch tie today. Okay, none? Thank you, appreciate it. And honestly, if there's ever questions, Rebecca and I will just check in and make sure things are going well. And if you want to shoot Rebecca a question, if it's a board question that we all need to address, or if it's just something you want to work with me on, let me know. Okay, perfect, thanks.
Thank you. All right, next, review of calendar surveys. Jason Cox.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this. We had visited, I think it was last board meeting, about our process. Caleb went ahead and was able to push out the survey and help people after receiving the initial data back of what they would like to see in the calendar itself. We were able to send out the survey, and there's one of the calendars is quite preferred this time. So calendar A was preferred at a rate of 65% as compared to calendar B. So tonight we're asking that you, or we recommend that you approve calendar A for the 23-24 school year. Any questions?
Which one was that?
Calendar A was the one that started a little earlier, and the
Give you
days.
an extra day of Christmas break.
Yep, 65 to 35, that one extra day, that's a big swing.
Well, I love these. I love it when we can just ask parents. The more the merrier of this. If they just always complain about your parents. So I love this. So let's think about more options, because these surveys seem like they're pretty great.
Well, thank you. We do the two-part, where we send out the initial just asking them what they want to prioritize as far as the different kinds of holidays that they would like to see, or alignment with other school districts, those kinds of things, and then we move to the actual proposed dates for the second survey.
Yeah,
And
the teachers were surveyed as well, correct?
yes,
And
yeah.
did they have a preference? I'm just curious.
They're counted in the overall.
In
I don't know,
overall.
Caleb, if did you disaggregate that?
They're not pulled out of this survey. They were separated out in the pre-survey with priority, and they fall right in line with parents on all their priorities. The only thing that's flip-flopped with them is their third and fourth preference. If I remember right, they preferred ending before Memorial Day a little bit less than spring break, I believe. I guess the winter break is always by far the most important option. Then second, third, and fourth is fall break, spring break, and anybody Memorial Day. They're always lumped in there together, pretty close.
And have you seen it stay about the same preferences every year?
Yeah, the second survey, we've had some years where it's a little bit closer in the final tallies than this, but it almost always, the preferences, that
Overall
survey
value.
stays the same, the results stay the same every year.
I have questions. So was this survey ever piloted?
Piloted as
Like a
in?
pilot survey,
Yeah.
this was kind of our attempt at a pilot survey.
Okay.
We've been doing this survey now, I want to say since 2015 was the first year that we established the survey. And we did the format of only doing the A-B choice in those first few years. I believe, and Caleb, you can correct me, we switched to asking people their preferences on the priority list in about 2018. I think that was the first year that we started asking for the priorities of where they would like things ranked as far as what's more important to them for the holidays.
So Dr. Ron Twitchell, who works in the teaching and learning department, is a doctorate in math, and he did a lot of study in his doctorate about surveys. We have him review every survey before it goes out. And so I don't think we have him review these because we've got a model that's fairly set now. But in the first couple of years, he would be very involved in the development of our surveys and the review of the data that we get.
Because I wish there would have been an other option. What are your other priorities? And have it be an open question so that anyone could write down what their priorities are.
We're actually looking at, Caleb and I've already talked about possibly looking to review or to slightly revise the first survey for next year to give a few more options and different things. He has a parent who asks him about, well, how do you know that maybe a bunch of us don't want to start until after Labor Day? Well, as much as we don't believe that should happen, we think we'd like to honor this particular parent's request about maybe we should put it on there and find out how many parents there are. I mean, but again, with every one of these things we put in there, there's got to be a trade-off, right? If you start after late, you're not going to end before Memorial Day unless you cut off Christmas break and spring break and those kinds of things. So there are trade-offs. But anyway, the point is we're going to be adding some things to next year's pre-survey just so we can get a little bit better view of what the latest things are. We haven't adjusted that pre-survey since we brought it in, have we, Caleb?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years since we added a little bit to it after the first year, and then we haven't adjusted since then.
Okay.
So were students asked what their opinion was?
Yeah, we actually share this survey with the teaching group and ask them to share it with their students. So it depends on kind of to what extent they give them. At the high school level, they'll often share it in the English class and in different opportunities where students would get more of a kind of, every student goes through that class so they get an option to potentially see it.
Okay. Because I'm still working on trying to get a day off in March for everyone. And I got some feedback from 4 schools, and they overwhelmingly wanted a day off.
Surprise,
surprise,
right.
yeah. And then some of the other ideas that they liked were either a professional development day, and the 2 teachers suggested this, either a personal planning day, especially right before all the tests start happening in March, and an online learning day. But they were also concerned about the same thing. If they have a day off, where is it going to be made up in the rest of the calendar? They definitely did not want Christmas or spring break cut short because of that. That was for sure.
Yeah, and it's a great question at the end. We do have a balance of days that we do need to keep in class, and so if we do have more of a day out somewhere, if we add a day out somewhere, we have to contrast that by having another day in school somewhere, and we often can work on that. I think kind of in response to those needs, the PEA spoke with me about us looking at some of those options that you discussed about looking at professional development in the future. Some of these things don't end up on the survey because we want to have the ability to set professional development as a school district in times where it'll be appropriate that teachers get an opportunity to implement it. They get it early enough in the year. But still, having said that, as a school board, you have the input, the final input on where you'd like us to do some of these different kinds of days, and so we're open to your feedback.
That's my feedback. Add
Okay.
in March after the time change on Monday, because nobody wants to wake up that morning, right? So
Well, and again,
add
I think
in a day of something, whatever. I really like the ideas that the teachers gave, which was either an online learning day or a personal planning day where the students had off, but the teachers were still working.
Yeah, and I appreciate your feedback. I think if the board wants to give us direction to go that way as a school board, then we will definitely, listen and follow and do some things to try to support you in that.
I'm personally opposed to any online school whatsoever.
Good to know.
So you got to agree as a board before we do something. So that's what I was
Maybe we need to
getting
talk
at.
about it more in another,
I think
like,
we
study
need to-
session or something.
Well, and something that we just need to consider too, that this is something that we need to go through PEA first and some negotiations to decide if this is something that really needs to be discussed. Go ahead.
No, I mean, the complication is trying to satisfy family needs, individual needs with the requirements of the schedule. And so, I mean, this is a survey that every district does, and Nate likes it, that parents get to weigh in, there's this or there's this. But there are things that we have to do that everybody wants a day off, but they don't want to make it up, that's where we get the division. And so it's more and more complicated, and going one school to the next, and there are some things that we have to work at the highest level for.
And we can't just let the parents choose whatever, right? We had to
Right.
throw in the basic form, because like you said, we have to get the PEA, we gotta get the
Right.
trainings, we have to do all that, and then you give them an option, and then they're not as mad.
Yeah, PEA has been great in this. Like I said, recently they've spoken to us about an option of a professional development day in March, or those kinds of things, and so that's something we will definitely consider as we're moving forward in this process. On the flip side of that, they also know how much parents have given us feedback from the city PTA and the school community councils about where the professional development days are currently tied, which is right next to a holiday, and liking an additional day with tied to that holiday or extended weekend. So there's a give and take to it, and we just want to find a good balance, a balance that supports everyone.
Throw in another question for priorities next year, and maybe this is something I can't move or change, but I'd be curious to know if people feel strongly about where spring break is. Not just the length of time, but, if we're concerned about the March being that long break, we just move spring break up a little bit, and
I can talk to that a little bit. So we are a part of the K-16 Alliance, and they hold a calendaring meeting every year, and there's two things that they ask us to try to honor, and those two things as school districts, and those are keeping a common spring break and a common fall break.
okay.
So those are the two pieces that they most often just ask of us. Now, could we go outside of that? Yes, but we usually try to honor that. So, for instance, this year, the proposed calendars for both Alpine and Nebo was a week off of what the K-16 Alliance had asked, and they came back to it after. It was their proposed calendar, it hadn't been set yet, so they moved it back to where ours was scheduled. So they'd gone a little further into April with their spring break.
And part of that is deference. We're valuing our teachers and their families who often live in
Right.
Orem and teach here, live in Springville, teach here, or have kids in Springville, and so we're privileging our employees just a little bit over maybe the rest, but our employees I mean, there are some things that we can do for them. We try and raise their pay, but this is another thing that we can do for them.
Well, maybe the Alliance would wanna all ask people, do we wanna move up the spring, and like we could do it together. I'm not saying that's the right answer, but.
Yeah, I
It
think.
makes Disneyland really crowded.
Yes, absolutely.
Honestly, my thing is just the weather. It's too cold to have it any sooner, man.
One
I
thing
need
we
some
could,
kind of good weather.
we could think about, we put in that snow makeup day at the end of April, last year. Last year I think was the first year we've done it.
That was due because the state required us to do that, is that correct?
No, it
No?
was, well, they require us to make up any days that we have to miss, and that, we had actually had that as part of spring break. And so the challenge was, are you actually getting a 5-day spring break, or are you having to come back for one of those days? And so we just said, we'll adjust the calendar, we brought it to the board, and it seemed to work, and I know people really liked it. We chose the end of April because the challenge at that time is probably not gonna be weather. We could look at moving that just right into March, but then again, it may be self-defeating if we do that, because we may have to make up another day at some point later on anyway, and the only way to do that at that point is to add a Saturday or come back after Memorial Day.
Can we
those
decide
kinds
we're
of
just
things.
gonna do online days anyway and not call Cindy?
We're hoping that that works. We still
Okay.
haven't put it to the test yet, although you never know what's gonna happen for the next
Tomorrow
3
morning.
days. Yeah. Anyway, but having that day is, there's a little flex there possibly. Anyway, it's something for you to think about. And that, I will tell you that from every person who works for the school district, from President's Day through until the first day of spring break, that is a long haul. It's a long haul.
Yeah, we all agree with that.
It's hard to teach through that whole chunk.
Yeah.
It is.
Keep the energy up and keep the kids' attention and all those kinds of things.
That's why they're bringing us a March day off.
Yeah.
Monster on tap.
There's also the that's the same window of when testing starts. There's just a lot of pressures and, plenty of things going on then. But I think we're all having the conversations with our different groups, and I think we could have a continued conversation about this to see where we'd like to go in the future.
Just board, I want to caution you that this could potentially get into items of negotiation. So that's where I would be very careful about when you talk to people about this or any promises. If you're simply gathering information, that's one thing. But any kind of promises that can maybe hamstring us at the bargaining table.
Well, and
Certain
we have
issues.
not decided anything as a board, so we
No,
can't
nothing.
individually
Yeah.
promise anything.
Nothing's been, yeah. And if it, it's something to reach out, if a teacher reaches out to you, the best way is to send them to their PEA rep in their building, so that the PEA is aware of what their concerns are.
PEA has a large stake in the calendar. They do. They make sure that they get a lot of participation for the calendar survey.
Okay. Any
Alright.
other questions about this?
So you've got a motion tonight to approve this.
Calendar A.
And to Terry's question, if at some point the board wants to consider an adjustment to a calendar, that can happen anytime. So we can put that on a future agenda.
I just want to wish Jason a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. The big 5-0.
Oh.
Black balloons and all.
And your black
That's
shirt.
a big one.
What a way to
No,
celebrate your
exactly.
birthday. Sorry you have to be here.
It's a great evening, right? It's the way to celebrate. So.
As an adult, that's what
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Next, we have the proposed 2022 Board of Education meetings. Is there any concern about the upcoming meeting schedule?
Yeah, I noticed November 8th is election day, and that's our only scheduled meeting. We're gonna need to add in a Canvas Day meeting, which would be coordinate with the county when that should happen. I mean, I looked at November 2020, and it might even have to be after Thanksgiving, because there's enough, I don't even know what day they're gonna be done counting votes. But we'll
That's not
have to.
something we can do at the December 13th meeting?
Normally
You would
they-
have to ask the county
They
probably.
normally do it exactly 2 weeks after the election day.
But that's Thanksgiving.
Is
I
it?
know, yeah.
Well,
Because it's
yeah.
it's November 8th, you know, election day has to be the first Tuesday after the first Monday. And the first Tuesday is November 1st, so that means November 8th is election day, which means, you know, it's just gonna take longer.
Could we move it to November 15th?
I don't
And
know
then-
if they'll be done counting votes.
They always have, it's always 2 weeks after election where you're like, it's the official last
No, I'm
time.
just saying we could move are we having concern about having our study session and business meeting on election day?
No,
No?
it's more like we'll probably have to add in a second meeting in November so we can do the canvassing of votes.
Do we have to canvass if
we
it's
don't-
not a bond?
Yeah,
Cause
I was gonna say
it's
there's
board
no-
members, but we don't have to canvass that, do we?
I don't know.
If we do
No,
truth and taxation,
there's
nothing
no,
on
I mean,
the lawn,
we just
we
send
can-
our election officer, which is usually the business administrator, that goes to the canvas
Yeah.
meetings, and.
There's not a bond, we don't have to canvass.
Yeah,
I
the-
don't
I think that's
foresee it.
correct, but we can check that.
yeah.
You'd have to coordinate with the county. I don't.
Okay, so we'll just leave it
There's
as
never
November
anything that
8th.
we vote on. There's an
Yeah, I'm not-
invitation that is made that we can observe, but there's nothing that we vote on to accept, we don't accept results, or we're just informed,
Yeah.
so.
And then I also noticed we might need to coordinate better with the city council in January and February, since they're gonna be going over census and boundary changes. I don't know if they even have their schedule yet. I don't know if the city council has decided on next year's schedule for their meetings yet, but
Derek is coordinating with Cliff Strachan to bring him in and talk to you folks on the business meeting in January. And so he'll outline that timeline. You're right, there may be a need to run a special meeting to, if things don't fall into, if the deadlines don't work with our meeting schedule.
Right.
Yep.
And we are just planning on doing 2 meetings with the city council, is that correct?
That's what they're preferring.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Is there any- Yeah.
so whatever the city needs to coordinate with that in January and February.
Yeah, we'll coordinate and work with them if we need to have a special meeting.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 times of the year that I foresaw what's coming up for next year. I didn't see anything else that needed to be happening.
Do we need to assign graduation speakers now, or can we do that?
We'll do that in January.
Okay. All right. There's no other further questions about that. That'll be in business meeting as well, right?
To approve this.
To approve this.
Yeah.
All right. Next up. Community council assignments. This was something that we talked about in our last study session. Was there any other feedback about wanting to be specifically assigned to a certain school to be part of that community council? Or would you rather just, if you feel like you want to just go to a certain city or community council, you just want to let that principal know that you'd like to come? Thoughts?
Well, I noticed during Alex's presentation that Slate Canyon now has a community council. Do they need one of us to be there?
I'm not sure, I need to go back and look at that. Currently Slate Canyon and the
State
hospital don't have community councils because they are constantly rotating kids, so it's hard to keep a parent there. Does that make sense? A
Yeah.
community there, so we haven't had one in the past, so I'm not sure if that was something.
Slate Canyon didn't even get any.
They got a small, tiny amount of money this year.
They shouldn't be, that should anyway.
It should have been 0 on that
Yeah,
one?
it should have been.
Okay.
And the reason for that is just they can't keep parents there, or their parents from all over the state, and trying to get a community council really becomes a tricky one. And so Derek usually works with or Joe actually does, but works with the state to redistribute that money either through our district or give it back to the state. So thanks for catching that information.
And is eSchool doing one this year, and do they need someone assigned to them?
You could be a part of that one, that'd be great, yeah.
I didn't volunteer.
I volunteer.
I was just
I volunteer, Terry.
I'm sure it's a Zoom meeting, right?
You open your mouth, you get it.
And I'm not saying it has to be, but what I am saying is that they do have a community council, and recognize the eSchool one is really challenging, just because you're pulling parents that are typically isolated in their own home, and you're bringing them to a meeting that oftentimes they just aren't interested in. And so Megan and Clint do a great job of managing it as best they can, but it is complicated. They're the families, the question you asked earlier, they're the ones that are often the most changed throughout the year.
I do remember in the past, was it Julie or was it you, McKay, like lamenting the fact that they didn't know how to help their eSchool assignment? Like I thought we had someone assigned to eSchool in the past.
We have, yeah, and I mean, this pretty much is the expenditures of funds on how to do that, and not have the carryover is just really hard.
The state is listening, though. They are trying to change because there's more online schools out there that are coming more and more. So we were kind of the forefront of it. So yeah.
Okay, so thoughts?
I have a thought. I really like the idea of being able to voluntarily go to another one. I would love to go to Provo Highs or any of your guys' stuff, but not have the obligation.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I agree.
Okay.
Please always feel welcome to go, but again, I would just reiterate one thing, that like 4 of you are going to go to one community council meeting at one time. That can become a little overwhelming to feel like the school board is invading the community council. And
We shouldn't have 4 there anyway, 3 now.
Yeah, that's a
Notice
quorum.
it as a meeting.
That's true. There you go. That's a touche. The other thing is too, when you are at those meetings, remember you're not part of the community council. So if they look to you to say, "What do you need us to do?" you say you're a community council. Remember to deflect that back to them and make sure that they maintain their responsibility in council.
And just remember to, as a courtesy, let that principal know that you're coming.
Just give them a heads up.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good to me. We'll just leave it at that. And if there's somebody that really wants eSchool, let me know. So.
And I wasn't trying to volunteer.
So, okay. Any questions about the consent calendar?
Yeah, I did. Unless it's been changed. Oh yeah. I noticed the minutes are locked and the public doesn't have access to them.
So
What happened?
they're, yeah, I was told to do that because they're, it's a draft
We
until
haven't
you approve
voted.
it in this meeting.
Correct.
And as soon as you approve it in this meeting, then it's unlocked and it's available to the public. I also put it on the public notice board early so they can see it there, but it says draft until approved at the top. So it is out there if you want to go look for it on the public notice website. But after I email it to you, I wait a few days, and if I haven't heard anything about changing it, I put it up usually within 3 days for a meeting, just because that's how I was trained at first, and then it's done and we don't forget about it, and it's up there. But I was told to make it private here because it's not really official until you approve it today.
So we can't put a big draft on the
It
thing?
does say that, so I mean, Keith, unless I'm wrong, I couldn't stop making it public or stop making it private in board docs.
No,
It's out there
on
anyway.
board docs it does say at the top, draft until approved, so.
Right, that's what
I don't think it needs to be locked.
Okay. As long as that's okay with my boss, I will do that.
I'll probably give Joan a call and check with her.
It's pretty standard practice to have minutes hidden until they're approved. It's not, this isn't the first districts that I've seen do it.
Okay. I had a question about homeschool. I'm trying to look you in the eye. And you're
Thank you. You guys
or hurt the topic, you know.
At first I looked at the report and it said there were 16 students at Preble High that approved, and then 5 minutes later I looked at the report and it did not say that there were 16 students at Preble High, so.
If you want to come out and review those numbers that we report are an additional request for homeschool notification. It doesn't necessarily have cumulative total, is I think maybe where you're looking, but we can unpack that number anytime you'd like to, or any public member would like to come see those. Liz Robles and I monitor those numbers, and I'd be happy to help you see what the status is of those at any time in student services.
No, I was just surprised that, like, within 5 minutes the number changed. I was kind of, when I downloaded the PDF, it was confusing.
Okay, well, I can't answer as to why that happened, but we
Yeah.
hope the data that's there is accurate. If there was an adjustment made, maybe something was caught and then revised so that it could be accurate.
That's what I was assuming, that somebody caught some
Thank
wrong information.
Well, thank you.
And then I had some questions on the financial report. On the executive summary, it's on page 6. Actually, let's go to the warrant report first, because that was my weird question. On page 2, is it normal to make 2 health insurance payments in 1 month? Because I went and looked back on previous months and it didn't have that.
I'd have to look into exactly what that payment was for. I know it can come down to a handful of things. You know, it could be the monthly premium. It could be another one. It could be the HSA payments that are going out. It could. I mean, there's a myriad of things that could be.
What was the month?
November.
November.
Last month.
Okay.
So.
And it was for Select Health and United Healthcare, both on November 3rd.
Both of them had 2 months. Both of them had 2.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it. And so
November 3rd and the 17th.
I can go back and dig up to find out what those exactly are. I couldn't spout that off the top of my head.
Okay. And then on the executive summary on page 6, in both the approved and working budget, it says we're had more expenditures than revenues.
Mm-hmm.
We're over by 28 million and 38 million. Want to explain why we spent more money than we have?
Well, let me pull it up so I can.
Page 6.
And then the executive summary? Is that what it was?
Yes.
Okay.
And on the all district funds, at the bottom of approved and working budget, says we're over.
Okay, so this, let's see here.
Within a given time period, right?
So
this isn't for just March. This is for the whole year leading up to.
Yep, so there is, so you can see the budget that was approved was already over 28 million. I'd have to go back and look, because it doesn't look like, the biggest thing is supplies and materials. So, okay, most likely what's happened, this goes back to, I'll have to, and we may change the way this is looking, because this is, I think, the second month that there's been questions on this. This is most likely all of the carryovers that have been loaded. So the budgets have all been loaded with, which was the approved budget, and then the carryovers have now been loaded on top of it. So trust lands had carryovers, right? So now we were adding that budget in on top of what the budget was approved, because we didn't know what those would be at the end of the year, which is approved. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's all my questions.
Okay. Just a reminder, Terry, I'm happy that you're asking these questions, but if you could just ask them in advance so that he can come prepared to answer the questions at the meeting, that'd just be helpful. So, okay, where are we at? Upcoming Google Calendar items. We have Christmas break coming up. And then January 6th to the January 8th, we have USDA conference, and I'm really excited about that. So, anything you want to say about that?
I think the two, so the two speakers are, I mean, the keynote that we've had for a long time, David Horsager, is actually really good, and goes to some of the discussions we've had in this district about communication. I mean, he traffics in trust. This is how you build trust in an organization or in leader, or this is how you generate trust. This is the formula. So that's really good. And then we were also able to book for Saturday. If you wanted to leave early, you'll probably miss the Iron Cowboy. If you do not know anything about him, he's a guy that ran. He did
He's a marathon runner.
He did 50 triathlons in 50 days, competitive triathlons. Then he did 100 triathlon lengths in 100 days. He just would get up and go that far every day. And he talks about endurance and setting goals but he's a really great speaker, and he's from Linden. He's terrific. So, but it should be good.
Great. Looking forward to it. Then January 11th, we'll have our opening study session and business meeting that day. And then Leaders Associates meeting, I'm going, I think Jennifer's going. Are you both going? Are you going? Alex, have you been?
We've got a team that's going.
Okay. So, we'll be headed down to that. And then the study session on January 25th. Is there anything we're missing? Okay. If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Okay. See you in there in 5 minutes.
And he said the other two guys are available.
Did you watch that? It was really good.
So, Team Peaks, 14 Peaks, about
We could hear